From above a bridge, Perfidia watches an immigrant detention center. Afterward, she meets with her fellow members of the revolutionary group the French 75 to make a plan to rescue the detained immigrants. In the evening, the rebels carefully sneak around to capture the guard at the gate. Then they break in through a hole they cut in the fence and wake up the soldiers to hold them hostage. While the group searches for the immigrants, Perfidia makes her way to the main office and holds Captain Stephen at gunpoint. She tells him about the ideals her group believes in, but Stephen only cares about how hot she is. Noticing this, Perfidia decides to humiliate him by forcing him to get wood in his pants and walk without hiding it. At the gate, the rebel truck arrives and all the immigrants are rescued. Pat is told on the radio that they're ready, so he lights up a bunch of fireworks in the area that act as a distraction so they can escape. All the soldiers are locked up behind the gate and Stephen tells Perfidia that he'll see her soon. Before leaving, Pat throws a smoke grenade at the soldiers, calling them out for supporting a fascist regime and demanding a revolution. The rebels then leave in their car and Pat and Perfidia end up kissing. They celebrate their victory by shooting their guns in the air. Since that night, Perfidia and Pat have been in a relationship. Pat makes explosives and Perfidia calls any politician who votes for laws that go against human rights. The rebels begin to blow up government offices, banks, and even the power grid, which leaves the city in darkness. As days pass, Stephen tries to track the attacks and watches the rebels act from afar. That way he can stare at Perfidia's body and get naughty with his own hand. One day, Stephen notices that Pat and Perfidia are dating and he gets terribly jealous. Sometime later, Perfidia and another rebel manage to get inside a courthouse and they go to the bathroom to hide bombs in the ceiling. Unfortunately, Perfidia is caught red-handed by Stephen, who offers her a deal. He'll let her keep on blowing things up if she meets him at a specific address later. In the evening, the duo meets in a motel and Perfidia gets naughty with Stephen to buy her safety. A few months later, Perfidia continues to do rebel activities as if she didn't have a huge pregnant belly. Her parents and Pat worry about the safety of the child. When the baby is finally born, Perfidia suffers from postpartum depression and doesn't spend much time with the baby. Pat begs her to settle down with him and the child, but Perfidia wants to keep on fighting for the cause and abandons them. When Pat goes to the supermarket to get some things for the baby, he's approached by Stephen, who asks him some questions about his daughter. Pat answers since he thinks it's just a friendly conversation, but Stephen creeps him out when he says that he loves black women. One morning, the rebels burst into a bank to rob it. A guard tries to fight back and Perfidia shoots him down. When the alarm goes off, the rebels have no choice but to escape in their cars. A chase ensues through the city and the rebel cars keep pushing other vehicles out of the way to avoid getting stuck in traffic. Soon both cars crash and the rebels are forced to keep running on foot. Unfortunately, the police quickly corner Perfidia and arrest her. Later she's visited by Stephen, who reveals that he can free her if she shares the location of the most important members of the French 75. After hearing about Perfidia's arrest, Pat gets ready to go into hiding. Fellow rebel Howard gives a device he's created that reacts to other people with the same device. Pat can use it to find people he can trust. Howard also teaches Pat a very complicated code they can use for secret conversations and gets him fake paperwork so he and his daughter can have new identities. While Pat escapes to a new city, Perfidia is put in the witness protection program. Using all the information Perfidia provided, Stephen hunts down most of the rebels to arrest them, and even kills a few who try to run. Eventually the organization is dismantled and Stephen receives an award for his achievement. When he tries to visit Perfidia to bring the big news, he discovers that she's escaped the house. Now Perfidia is hiding in Mexico. 16 years later, Pat's daughter is a teenager using the fake name Willa. In her free time, she learns martial arts from an instructor called Sergio. Pat is constantly paranoid and spends most of his time smoking Mary Jane, but at least he attends parent-teacher conferences. Meanwhile, Stephen still works on immigrant detention centers and one day he receives a very special invitation. He goes to a hotel and meets the members of a white supremacist group called the Christmas Adventurers Club, which Stephen has been trying to join for a long while. They ask him a bunch of questions including if he ever had an interracial relationship, and he answers no. The club promises to analyze his profile and will let him know if he's allowed to join them. In the meantime, Howard is still doing some secret work as a rebel, like sending out his calls for action through the radio. One day he's captured by bounty hunter Avanti, who takes him away in his car. The neighborhood kids see this and rush into Howard's house to use his radio equipment. They send out a coded message announcing Howard's capture. Later Howard is taken to a military facility and a soldier threatens to kill his sister if he doesn't cooperate, so Howard tells them where to find other rebels. The information is passed to Stephen, who organizes a fake mission so his soldiers can raid Pat and Willa's town. At home, Willa and Pat get into an argument because Pat continues to smoke too much and Willa feels like she's babysitting him all the time. Before she goes to her school dance, Pat forces her to take one of Howard's devices. He also threatens the classmate who picks Willa up because his paranoia makes him see everyone as a potential enemy. Later at school, Willa goes to the bathroom and hears the device beeping. When she turns around she finds Deandra, who says the secret code to confirm she's one of Pat's rebel friends. Deandra explains there's been an SOS signal and they need to leave urgently. On their way out, they watch the police surrounding the school and run to the car before they can be seen. Deandra asks Willa if she's heard about Steven, and Willa explains that Pat told her Steven killed her mother. It seems she thinks that Perfidia was a hero. The school dance is interrupted by Steven's soldiers looking for Willa. The teens get interrogated, and when a soldier asks for Willa's number, her friends explain that her father doesn't let her have a phone. At the same time, Pat gets a call from a rebel who asks for the code. He's smoked too much and his memory is failing, but after thinking hard he manages to recite it. The rebel tells him that Howard was captured and Steven is coming for Pat. Willa has successfully been taken to safety, so Pat has to go to one of the usual rendezvous points to reunite with her. Pat can't remember the locations, but before he can ask, the rebel hangs up. By the time the soldiers burst into the house, they can't find Pat. While Steven grabs a picture of Willa and smells it, the soldiers find the secret tunnel that Pat is currently using to escape. They throw a smoke grenade inside and Pat has trouble breathing, but he hurries up and manages to reach the exit before passing out. Afterward, Pat uses a payphone to call the rebel base, but they refuse to give him any information because he doesn't remember the whole code. The soldiers spend the entire day raiding houses and businesses all over town while Pat sneaks around. Sergio gets a call from his wife warning him that they're taking immigrants, so she's afraid they may be next. At that moment, Pat arrives to ask for his help, so Sergio agrees to take him to his house. During the drive, Pat tells Sergio about French 75 and Willa's situation. Sergio tells Pat to just call her and realizes that Pat didn't know that Willa has had a secret phone all this time. Sadly, Sergio doesn't have her number either. Soon the locals begin protesting on the street because they don't want the soldiers in their town. A protester throws a Molotov bomb that starts a fire in the middle of the street, and a cop shoots at the crowd a few times before the soldiers begin advancing with their shields. Sergio talks to some skaters and asks them to tell all the remaining immigrants to hide at their usual church. Afterward, the duo goes to the store owned by Sergio's wife, which has a secret room upstairs where they allow illegal immigrants to hide. Sergio sends everyone away before taking Pat to his apartment, where he starts gathering all his cash and guns. Pat calls the rebels again, but they still won't tell him anything without the code. A furious Pat starts ranting and insulting the operator and eventually says a different code that allows him to talk to a supervisor. This guy is an old friend of his and asks him a personal question that Pat manages to answer to finally confirm his identity. Now they give him the coordinates to find Willa. Meanwhile, Sergio and his wife guide all the immigrants to a secret tunnel so they can escape. The soldiers make it to the store and yank the shutter so they can go inside. Sergio gives Pat a weapon and asks BG to drive Pat out of town, then Sergio leaves with the immigrants. As the soldiers make their way upstairs, Pat and BG escape through the roof. At the police station, a soldier threatens to send Willa's friends to jail, so they finally give him her secret number. Willa's phone rings and Deandra gets furious because Willa hid it from her. Deandra immediately throws the phone out the window and it breaks. This is still enough time for Steven to track it. In town, Pat follows BG and his friends as they jump from roof to roof as fast as possible. Sadly, Pat slips and falls, allowing the police to quickly tase him and arrest him. BG calls Sergio to tell him what happened and confirms that he has the gun. That night, Deandra drops Willa off at a convent to protect her. She also asks the nuns not to tell her the truth about Perfidia. The next morning, the Christmas Adventurers Club leaders gather to discuss Steven. They've received a report saying that he has a mixed-race child, so they've been tracking his movements, and they think that the current raids in town are a cover-up for Steven to look for his daughter. They also look at Perfidia's file and learn she was last seen wandering in Cuba or Algiers. The group doesn't want Steven to get rid of the kid to fool the organization, so they asked him to clean the mess. At the police station, Pat acts like an addict who doesn't even know his own name. They take him to the hospital for screening and a nurse calls him Pat, so he realizes her questions are in code. When she asks if he's a diabetic who hasn't had his insulin since yesterday, he says yes, so he's taken to a private room. The nurse uncuffs him and tells him of escape route. Pat quickly sneaks out of the hospital and Sergio picks him up. Meanwhile, Steven interrogates a shop owner near the last location of Willa's phone. The guy tells him about the car he saw going to the hills in the middle of the night and about the convent located on those hills. At the convent, Willa is trained in the arts of fighting and firearms. She hears the nuns call her mom a rat and asks Deandra for the truth, so Deandra confirms that Perfidia betrayed them. Suddenly Deandra hears a noise and goes out to investigate, but it's too late. The soldiers burst in and arrest everyone. Willa is taken to Steven, who gets a DNA sample from both her mouth and his. He puts the samples in a machine and explains that if the results are negative, he'll let her go. Otherwise she'll be in trouble. Willa says that Pat is her father no matter the test results and keeps taunting Steven with mocking comments, causing him to snap and yell at her. The machine then finishes the test and confirms that Willa is Steven's daughter. On the road, Sergio and Pat are seen by the police and a chase ensues. Sergio gives Pat the gun and slows the car down so Pat can jump out. However, Pat isn't brave enough to do it, so Sergio makes a sudden turn to make him fall. Pat hides in a ditch while the police pass by to continue to follow Sergio's car. Afterward, Pat steals a vehicle from a parking lot and makes his way to the convent, where he finds a high spot to observe the situation. After getting rid of the test evidence, Steven drags Willa out and gets her in his car. Pat opens fire from afar, but he doesn't land any of his shots, and the soldiers fire back while Steven drives away. A desperate Pat runs back to his car and drives as fast as possible to follow them. Soon Howard's device starts ringing, which confirms he's getting closer to his daughter's device. A few hours later, Stephen meets with Avanti and tells him he needs to get rid of Willa, claiming she's mixed with a cartel. However, Avanti says he doesn't kill children and still refuses when Stephen doubles the money. In the end, Stephen pays him to take Willa to a far-right militia in the area. When Willa is dragged out of the car, she kicks Stephen and tries to escape, but Stephen quickly catches her and puts her in Avanti's car. In the meantime, the cops manage to stop Sergio, who pretends he's drunk. When they ask him what he threw out of his car earlier, he says it was trash. Down the road, Stephen notices another vehicle getting too close. The driver is Tim, who asks him to lower his window. When Stephen does so, Tim quickly shoots him in the head and Stephen's car crashes. Moments later, Pat arrives and is horrified to see the crash. He rushes to check the destroyed vehicle and is relieved to find only Stephen's body. At the militia base, Avanti drops Willa and gets ready to leave. However, he sees the creepy way the local soldiers act and he doesn't like it, so he comes back and uncuffs Willa. She immediately runs away while Avanti starts shooting all the guards. Then Willa gets in Avanti's car to steal a gun before going back to the building. All the soldiers are dead and so is Avanti, so she takes his keys and leaves in his car. When Willa reaches the road, she notices another vehicle following her. It's Tim, who wants to kill her too. Suddenly Willa stops the car and runs to hide after leaving it in the middle of the road. Tim is driving too fast and with the sunlight in his eyes, so he doesn't stop his car in time and crashes right into Willa's vehicle. When he comes out, Willa says the rebel code and Tim obviously doesn't know how to reply, so Willa shoots him down. At that moment another car stops nearby and Willa notices it's her dad. She panics and says the code, which Pat answers while assuring her it's fine. Willa runs to him and they reunite with a hug before leaving in his car. Meanwhile, it's revealed that Stephen only pretended to be dead and is now leaving with a disfigured face. The next time Stephen meets the leaders of the Christmas Adventurers Club, they ask him about Perfidia. Stephen claims she sedated him and took advantage of him, so the leaders agree to let him join the club. He's taken to his new office and he gets comfortable, but this is actually a trap. A deadly gas is released into the room and Stephen dies in seconds. Then two men in hazmat suits take the body away to cremate it. In the meantime, Pat tells Willa that Perfidia sent her a letter, but he didn't give it to her because he wanted to protect her from her parents' dangerous past. Pat gives Willa the letter now and she immediately reads it. Perfidia apologizes for disappearing and says she thinks of Willa every day. She hopes that Willa will grow up to change the world and perhaps then they can finally meet. Willa hugs her father as thanks for letting her have this. Later, Pat finally gets phones for himself and Willa. They keep up with the rebels' events on the radio and Willa starts attending the protests too.
Like, comment, share, and subscribe. Thanks for watching. See you on my next video.